Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and being a producer of Wrestle Massacre as well as Inside Movies Galore, I am David Strege, and welcome to Delusions of Grandeur. Enjoy the reviews. I certainly did. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting film journey here on Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts. But today we are continuing and finalizing this month with another movie that we've been subjected to. I don't know, Jake. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the film that I watched along with you guys?
All right. Well, we'll be looking at the 2012 film by John Hurwitz and Hayden Schlossberg, called American Reunion, which, fittingly enough, reunites pretty much all the significant cast of American Pie in some form or another. Many of them mere cameos, but it definitely brings everyone back for one last round of the main. There's a rumored possibility of another one, who knows, but for now this closes off the story. Slightly different in that Adam Herz, the primary writer of all three of the other films in the main series, is here credited as an characters by, with John Hurwitz and Hayden Schlossberg writing as well as directing. And once again, we see Jason Biggs as Jim, Allison Hannigan as Michelle, Chris Klein returning as Ostraker, Sean William Scott as Stifler, Thomas Ian Nicholas as Kevin. We see the return of Mina Suvari as Heather and Tara Reid as Vicky, Eddie K. Thomas as Finch, Jennifer Coolidge as Stifler's mom, Eugene Levy as Jim's dad. After being graduated to John Cho is once again referred to as MILF Guy number 2. And we have cameos by Natasha Lyonne, Shannon Elizabeth, Chris Owens, and some new members of the cast. Dania Ramirez as Selena, Katrina Bowden as Mia, Ali Cobran as Kara, Jay Harrington as Dr. Ron, Charles Hittinger as AJ, and a cameo by Neil Patrick Harris. So, some good stuff. Oh, and a cameo by Rebecca De Mornay as Finch's mom. You know where that's going.
I love Neil Patrick Harris's cameo in this. Yes. It brings me White Castle returning vibes.
Well, this is the directing team behind the Harold and Kumar movies, if I recall correctly. And it re-teams John Cho, Eddie K. Thomas, and Neil Patrick Harris. So
they need a crossover movie.
Yes, they do. Yes. But anyway, so the brief note on IMDb: Jim, Michelle, Stifler, and their friends reunite in East Great Falls, Michigan, for their high school reunion, which strangely enough is not a 10-year, it's more like a 13-year reunion, but it's 10 years since American Wedding, so I guess it makes sense in that regard. So we shall start around the room. I guess Tammy couldn't join us, huh?
She's sleeping.
Okay.
Pick me.
Okay. Well, we'll pick you, Brandon. Why don't you start us off? Is this your first time with this movie, and what are your initial thoughts?
No, not my first time. I thought this movie. I watched this movie shortly after it came out, and then I may have seen it one more time. I don't know, but if I did, it was many years ago, and never again. Not because I thought it was a bad movie. Matter of fact, I think after rewatching it, I know why I didn't return to this movie. Because there's a couple of areas in this movie that hit a little bit too close to home, and then it makes me feel old.
Yeah. Yeah.
hitting this right after American Wedding.
Mm-hmm.
The improvement in quality is just staggering to me. I was surprised at how much a better movie this is. It didn't feel lazy. A lot of the issues were gone. They gave most of the characters things to do instead of just focusing on Jem the whole time.
Yeah.
It was actually, to me, one of the best in the series. Probably my favorite next to the first one, even though I'll probably watch the second one more than I watch this one.
Right.
And that is that.
Good deal. And how about you, Dave? You said you guys did not cover this on your recent revisit of the
We didn't
series.
cover it on the recent visit in the series, and I also have never seen this one before.
Okay.
Now, there are moments in here that I think spoke well. I do agree with Brandon that this is a better film than American Wedding was. But I wouldn't put this on par with the first one at all. I would say that it is at least better than 2. It's like in the middle between there. But I did like the returning characters. I like the fact that not everyone was defunct, from the film, because it felt like there were characters missing from American Wedding. So, to me, this is the movie that American Wedding should have been. So, that being said, I mildly enjoyed this film. I mean, I love the fact that one of the characters in here called him Sandler.
Well, yeah, I figured you'd notice that.
Because originally that's what he kind of looked like with his egghead hairdo. But that being said, I actually think that, him doing the college or high school shit in this movie, I don't know. I feel like Adam Sandler did it better. but I can see. I did like the storyline. I did like the fact that it wasn't Stifler's mom this time, which I'm sure we'll get into eventually. And I thought the situations were real enough, Other than that, I think that Eugene Levy was definitely on par in the movie. I think he's part of what keeps these films going in a way, just like Stifler. And I think Stifler was actually, even though he was on par with his antics, I think he was kind of tame, to be fair. But I enjoyed it. It's not that it made me love the series anymore. I was okay with it. So.
Okay. All right. And for my part, I'll admit I was pretty excited when this came out. And I know I saw it not long after its release. I think this may be the second time I've seen it. I haven't seen it all that often. Maybe the third time. It's hard to say. I did not remember it very well. Like most of the others, I remembered because I'd seen them enough that like watching it felt really familiar. This one, not as much. And part of that is because they didn't try to copy all the story beats. They copied a lot of them, but there was enough variation in the presentation that it was easier to, I guess, be mildly surprised by certain things. But a lot of it did come back to some of those original story beats and what have you. And I agree with Brandon. There are parts of this movie that just make you feel old. And one of the parts I always remember, the timing of it is freaking weird. Because I think just 2 or 3 days before, it might have even been the day of that I saw this for the first time. I heard on the radio they were joking. I don't know if they were joking, but they were kind of half joking about how kids nowadays consider Backstreet Boys classic rock. And it's like, oh my God. I like facepalmed when I heard that. I'm like, oh my God, no, they are not rock to begin with, but classic rock. Are you kidding? And then this movie, and there's the scene where Jim is driving Kara home and Wannabe by the Spice Girls comes on. And she's like, isn't classic rock the best? And I'm like, oh my God, no. It's hilarious and painful at the same time.
What a ditz.
What's that?
I said, what a ditz.
Right. Well, and again, they don't know better. And now, like, if you really look at it, honestly, look at like when the Backstreet Boys, when the Spice Girls, when they were huge, that is now considered classic rock. Like Brandon was talking about Garbage not long ago. Garbage and Nirvana and Dave Matthews Band and Bare Naked Ladies and all that stuff that was huge in the 90s is classic rock now.
You know, it's sad. It really is, because I'm looking back and I'm thinking about back in time, right?
Right.
And when I was growing up in the 80s, Beatles were actually younger in the 80s to me than, say, well, let me go back to the 90s. Okay. The Beatles in the 90s are about the same equivalent to today, because that's 30 years. And the 90s is 30 years.
Well, maybe a closer equivalent, like with Kara having been she's 18. Her 18th birthday is in this film, so she would have been born. Let's see, if this was 2013, so late 90s. Okay,
mid-late young millennial.
Yeah, mid-late 90s. So that's almost the same equivalency of like your favorite group, Queen, I guess, relative to you, right? So like, Queen was considered classic rock by the mid-90s.
Yep.
But I don't know exactly when they graduated to classic rock, but definitely by the mid-90s. So it's like, now again, I would call Queen rock long before I would call Spice Girls rock, you know.
Yeah, the rock part is where it kind of gets into the stipulation.
Yeah.
Classic,
Spice Girls will always be pop to me. Pop, just straight pop.
Now, like if they were playing something like Crash Into Me,
classic pop.
If they've been playing Crash Into Me by Dave Matthews Band, first of all, that would have been perfectly appropriate for an American Pie movie, but the line would have made more sense. But I do like the hilarity of it. The oh my God, you poor child.
Shoot, they could have played something from the original movies, like Blink 182.
Exactly. If they played Blink 182 in that scene, it would have fit perfectly. I mean, for better or for worse. But anyway, but the timing of that, my hearing that comment about the Backstreet Boys, again, I think it was the morning I saw this movie. So just the timing of that has always stuck in my brain. And, you know, but again, for me, also, my class did do a 10-year reunion. They skipped out on the 20, but they did do a 10. So I did do that. And I got kind of a taste of what they have here. So the whole idea really kind of, it does hit home, sometimes in good ways, sometimes not so good ways. I like the idea that the movie kind of was a reunion for most of the people involved. Like I think I forgot to mention somehow. I don't know if I mentioned Natasha Lyonne as Jessica. She's back in there. But Stifler's brother doesn't show up. So he was one left out. And they killed off Jim's mom. Like, she shows up in home movies, but she's not. Molly Cheek is not actually in the cast. And so I was like, so that was two they didn't have. But pretty much everyone else from the first movie. They didn't bother with the later movies. So I kind of felt bad that Michelle's family was MIA. You know, it would have been a fun opportunity to see more of January Jones or Fred Willard. But, you know, such is life. Or bringing Bear back because he was such a great character, you know. Or
I could have seen Bear coming back.
No,
right.
As the planner for the party now.
Yeah, there you go. But then, you know, they did bring back some good people, and some of the new ones were pretty cool. And overall, again, I had a relatively little memory of it beyond a few of those feelings I just mentioned. Like the actual plot, I'd lost a lot of it in my mind. Revisiting it was fun. Got to enjoy coming back to this. I agree. It definitely feels like a tighter, better formed movie than I really loved American Wedding when it came out. But going through all four movies, I do have to agree it may be the weakest one in terms of the way it's put together. And that's unfortunate. But and my biggest issue here is, unfortunately, is that, you know, Jim and Michelle are kind of on the outs. Luckily, they don't turn her into a shrew or anything like that. They show her as being just as frustrated as Jim, just in different ways. And so they went in a better direction than they might have, but I still found it a little, I felt bad for them. Most of the other cast, I think they picked good spots for them to be at this point in their lives. You know, most of them, they had a pretty organic way of bringing them back. And Nadia was a little forced, I thought, but
well,
she probably always was going to be.
at least it was just a cameo for her.
Yeah,
it was always needed.
Exactly.
But none of the main cast felt left out this time, as far as like the main ones. Like American Wedding, well, that was obvious left out, and then even the ones that were there were mostly left out.
They gave Kevin a lot more to do in this one.
Yes.
And of course, since Oz and Heather were in this one, they had a lot more to do. Yeah.
Like I say, all of them seem to have a lot more. I mean, yes,
the
focus is still somewhat more on Jim than the others, but it's always been that way. But the rest of them had more time to shine than they had in any movie but the first one, really.
And also, by making Jim's dad a widower, like, I feel bad that they killed off his mom without really any explanation. But by making him a widower and Jim trying to encourage him to get back out there, for one, this is the first time we see him directly interact with both Stifler and Stifler's mom. And that leads to some interesting scenes.
I love the party. I love the party.
But at any rate, so we will launch into it. As we've kind of already set up, the movie basically centers on the main characters going back to East Great Falls for their reunion. MILF guy number 2, John Cho, is the guy who brings everyone together, although he doesn't really have a big role in the film physically. That's just his part, which does give him some lines and stuff to do.
He has more to do with the movie than any of the other movies that he was in.
yeah, he does. And now his partner, MILF guy number 1, or Justin, only has a brief cameo, and it's kind of interesting there. at one point, one of them's like, "Where's that guy you're always hanging out with or whatever?" And he's like, he makes some comment about that's the thing with friendship or something like that. It's very clear they had a parting of the ways, and it's not explained why. And but of course, they are reunited by movie's end. You know, minor spoilers. There's a lot of.
It was a great thing. They were united again by what brought them together in the first place.
Exactly. I like how they're like, one of them just comes up and tentatively says, "MILF, MILF, MILF, MILF." It's like they know each other's language. But at any rate, so we see, we start, you got to start with Jim in an awkward, embarrassing situation. And oh, is it ever? We find out right out of the gate that Jim and Michelle are now parents, and they got a little 2-year-old. And they're, they still like each other, but it looks like they do look a little worn down, I guess you might say. And she puts the kid to bed. She's like, "Oh, I'm going to go take a shower." And of course, Jim can barely wait to bring out the porn, because Jim. Mm-hmm. And then we see a very awkward scene where his kid walks in on him. And and then he, being Jim, flails about in pain before stumbling into the bathroom and finding that Michelle is also been relying on a crutch. In her case, the shower head. And so that there's your awkward opening Jim scene, and it's an American Pie movie. But what do y'all think of this opener?
Well, I mean, it can fall very close to home when it comes to that sort of thing, because you have a child and then it just throws off the couple's rhythm entirely.
Right.
Which is a recurring theme throughout the movie for them.
Yes. Having a kid in your life sometimes throws off your equilibrium, especially if you're new parents. And this kid looks like he's about 5 years old. So he's.
I think they say he's 2, but.
Okay, well, he's 2 going on 5.
It could be,
because he's definitely starting to be more aware of things, which means you got to watch what you say, because he could carry it into another conversation with other family members, and they could turn and look at him like, that kid shouldn't know that shit. But it is definitely an awkward situation to catch both mommy and daddy catching a bit of the birds and the bees.
Yes. Yeah. And I think both of them, unfortunately, one of the themes I think that in this movie is a strong theme in the movie is, I guess, learning to embrace being an adult and learning to grow up, if you will. Like we saw a lot of that in American Wedding, but it obviously the lesson did not stick where Stifler was concerned. And it's obvious that all of them still have areas where they're kind of holding on to the past a little bit. And of course, with Jim and Michelle, part of that, and I guess part of the trick of becoming new parents is, I think Jim's dad said it great later. Like he told, they had a little, they have a few heart to hearts in the movie, because that's their thing. That's, and they had one part where he's like, I think what he said was, you're now a daddy and a mommy, but you need to remember that you're also still husband and wife. Like,
Yeah.
you know, he's like, you know, he's like, you need to remember that, yes, you have this new role, but your old role is still there. And, you know, and that really helped Jim a lot. But like I think they had lost sight of that. And that was a big part of their issue.
They know what's going on. They know the problem, and the scene helps identify the problem.
Right.
And part of this reunion was them being able to get some more alone time, some more time for them, because that's one of the biggest problems, is they weren't spending time with each other. It was just family.
Which, of course, got thrown out the window when Jim's friends, particularly Stifler, get involved, because when Stifler gets involved, he kind of takes over.
Yeah, life finds a way to get in their way every time.
Right. Yes. That great line for life.
If they had chosen a different bar to be at than their normal hangout spot, they wouldn't have run into Stifler.
Well, I don't know if that was their normal hangout spot. We don't really know how long they were still hanging out in East Great Falls, but it seems like that's Stifler's normal hangout spot.
We didn't see the dog place, the dog house or whatever it was.
We saw it at the very end.
Yeah.
That was their final scene was at Dog Ears. But now the bar, they all come back. You know, we see scenes of Jim talking on the phone with Kevin, who we find out Kevin is married, and he seems happy, but he works from home, and his wife is a big fan of reality TV. So apparently a big part of his life is just hanging out with her and watching reality TV. And they talk about the Real Housewives, and Jim has that line, you know who my favorite housewife is. You, Kevin. But then you got we find out Oz is a successful TV personality. Like, he's not top tier, but he's pretty well known, and he's apparently a big celebrity at home. Like, he's mobbed by fans periodically throughout the movie. But he also
apparently he had been in a dance contest that he didn't win.
Yes, to his eternal shame.
Most of the females think that he should have won.
Well, think about it. Think about it. He lost to Gilbert Gottfried. I mean, that's got to be humiliating. But and also when we see his dance. Now, in fairness, Chris Klein apparently trained hard to get that dance down, and he supposedly gave it his all. And he's not terrible. It's just he's not great. And it's kind of a bad form. Like, he tried to act like he's like some sort of hip-hop guy, and he's not.
You even had the track suit.
Yeah. And then, of course, the host of that that's our cameo from Neil Patrick Harris, where I think he had fun with that. But we get to see that later on at I think it was at Stifler's party, where or maybe it was a later gathering, but I think it was Stifler's.
No, Stifler's party, where basically the new boyfriend brought that in to embarrass him.
Right. Well, we had seen. Now, was it him or no? I think it was actually his girlfriend brought it.
Yeah, his girlfriend actually was with him, but
she was proud of it. She was proud of it. It's like, yeah, he has a much younger girlfriend, Mia, who is, let's say, a free spirit. She parties hardy, and
that reminds me of the black, the colored man who evidently was gay, that she was in the pool with, and he was flirting his butt cheeks at Oz.
Yeah, when we're first introduced to Mia, we briefly think that she is just cuckolding him out the wazoo. And then we just find out that, she's just a free spirit. And I was wondering why that name was familiar to me. She is played by Katrina Bowden. I was trying to remember why. She co-starred on 30 Rock. That's why I know her. But she's an interesting fella. Girl, I mean. Interesting fella would be the one who's dating Heather, Dr. Ron. And he is handsome. Eron, yes. He is a handsome heart surgeon who quickly we come to learn neither Mia or Ron are really necessarily terrible people, but in Mia in particular, I think is actually a pretty. She's not bad. She's just way too into the party life. But they're such colossally mismatched with Heather and Oz. And that's, they're kind of introduced, I guess, as a way to kind of push those two kind of back together.
I love when they take the ecstasy. But
man.
But then again, I mean, a lot of the movie was a lot of questions going, wait, how do we get from A to B? Like,
Right.
How did Kevin go from being in law school to being a house husband?
Right.
How did Oz being a sportscaster isn't too far out of the way, but
No.
still, it's a little ways off from what he was thinking about doing.
Now, him being in that dance competition.
Yeah, that was a little bit closer. And even Stifler, we're like, wasn't he coaching football? What?
Right.
How did he go from A to B? He was actually doing really well coaching the football.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe, I mean, it's obvious in here that he just hasn't really grown up. And it could be that he just got tired of the responsibility of being a coach. I mean, it's,
To me, this movie had one thing going that it did not, that did feel odd to me, is I felt like this is a movie for people who didn't watch American Wedding and just went straight from American Pie 2 to this. I almost feel like the writers didn't watch American Wedding.
It could be that a lot of people agreed with you that movie was
It's not canon.
But our character of Selena, who we meet at the bar, apparently she's the one that played Cinderella on Once Upon a Time. Dania Ramirez has been in a few things over the years, but I'm trying to remember what I know. Heroes, that's what I know her from. She was Maya. Okay, so yeah, been a couple other roles too. But yeah, so they when they are reunited at the bar, it's stated that they specifically did not send an invite to Stifler. It's also stated that they sent one out to Finch, but they didn't know for sure if he even got the message. Because apparently Finch has gone AWOL for some time. And when he shows up on a motorbike. And this is one area where I feel like they carried over a little bit from American Wedding, because he flirted with the whole asshole bad boy persona in that one. And here it feels like maybe he decided, a little bit of that might still be worth keeping around. Because he definitely flirts with that idea when he first comes back in, riding that bike and everything. And it doesn't take him long at all to start flirting with Selena, who we come to find out was a classmate of theirs who had been a, quote, ugly duckling, who, the idea of the ugly duckling who grew up to be a swan. We see pictures of her and we're like, how is this girl the same girl? But apparently she was one of Michelle's band camp friends. And they... But she and Finch quickly hit it off. But of course, Stifler shows up after work, ready to blow off some steam and throw down some drinks, and sees them at the bar. And he's like, wait, what are y'all doing back here? And they're like, oh, didn't you get our invite? You know, that awkward, like, trying to pretend you're... and of course, since everyone's back in town, he's got it in his head. He's going to throw another one of those classic parties like he always did. And he throws a party ready to party, only to be shocked that everyone shows up acting like adults. Like one couple shows up with a young child, and they've changed the music because they wanted something more family friendly. And he's going around with this shirt says orgasm donor on it, and like, the hell, you know? And meanwhile, I think we've had the talk between Jim and his dad where we find out that his dad's trying to get back out there. And as per usual, I know I'm getting scenes out of order and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, but whatever the case, they end up inviting his dad to the party, which doesn't turn out to be nearly as big of a faux pas as it turned out because everyone's being adults. It would have been awkward if it was one of Stifler's old school parties, but Stifler finds himself in need of someone to party with and takes it upon himself to get Jim's dad having some fun. So, does anyone have any thoughts on all that mishmash of stuff I just threw out? Scenes leading up to this point.
I feel like Stifler definitely had his awkward moment where he just kind of accidentally runs into everyone and, you know, kind of invites himself along on the ride as usual. So, kind of goes how I think. So, it's kind of predictable up to a point.
Okay.
And your first impression, Dustin?
Oh, hey, Dustin.
When I first saw the film, I don't remember when I originally saw this. It came out kind of quite a bit after I had sort of stopped watching this kind of mainstream movie as much. I think it was something that I saw with like a little fanfare, and it's like, oh yeah, I should see that. And I ended up, really enjoying it, like I did with the rest of the series. So I have a pretty, just glowingly positive opinion of this ever since the first viewing. So I think it does a really good job of kind of showing the progression of time with our characters, like as real adults now, with established lives, and just kind of showing the progression of time. And what I mean by that is just how much you change over the course of your life. And they're still, weird, awkward guys, but much, much, much less so. Like, only have one particularly bad, public misunderstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's good that the actors actually kind of age with the characters in this. You can see they visibly aged as well, but you would, considering how long it's been since the first movie.
Right.
And then we also forgot about the girl that Jim babysat sat as a child, and she's gotten to be 18 or 19.
Well, again, they celebrate
17.
She turns 18 in this. Like, that's her birthday they go to later.
And
which actually, I think her birthday is the night before Stifler's party, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go to the lake to have like their own. Yeah, let's go to the lake like the old days, and they basically crashed the birthday by accident.
So we kind of actually skipped a whole bunch of stuff there, but one of them was, yes, accidentally crashing her party, which she had invited him to.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd also been introduced to her D-bag boyfriend, who is like Stifler without the charm, I guess you could say.
And Stifler got the worst case of revenge. I mean, they splashed him, but he not only took a crap in their the cooler, but he destroyed their jet skis. I mean, that's a bit over for
so yeah, that's worth mentioning because you got to have at least one gross out scene in each of these movies, and that was certainly one where so they're at the beach, where that's where we're introduced to D. Ron. That's where we see Heather again, and we're introduced to Dr. Ron. And that's and everyone gets to meet Mia, and all three of the guys are just staring at her, and Oz is like, do y'all have to stare? And they're like, all in turn, yes we do, yes we have to. And meanwhile, Michelle's hanging out with Selena, and they're just kind of having girl talk, and Stifler's being Stifler, going around doing dumb shit because Stifler. And then Kara's boyfriend, AJ, is going around stealing bras, and he steals Mia's, and he steals a bunch of others, and him and his friends hop on jet skis and go off spraying all the guys with water. And of course, Stifler needs revenge. So in Stifler's case, he tells each one of the guys he's going to do something different. He tells each one a different story. And when they all compare notes, they're like, oh my God, what's he actually going to do? And yes.
He does the Stifler.
He goes and literally takes a shit in the cooler and has a good time doing it too. He's just chilling, having a beer, having a good old time. And he ties the jet skis, unbeknownst to the guys, he ties the jet skis to the truck. And so they sit and watch, and when AJ goes and gets a fistful of shit, he realizes something's up and goes, and they go running for the truck, and they drive off, and the jet skis come up on the beach and hit the trees and get torn to bits. And of course, none of them quite expected that.
It's their fault for putting that cooler so far away from themselves.
You got to burn those carbs somehow, right?
They don't have to burn crap.
Right. So they do that. And then later on, there's the party where AJ's a no-show, and Kara says something about, he said something about his jet skis, like he thinks that she just blew him off when he's probably busy talking to the insurance companies and the cops and everything. But she had invited Jim, and they end up stumbling on the party, not expecting it. And so we get the little thing of she, is getting more and more wasted and putting Jim in more and more an awkward situation. The others are wandering around doing their thing. Michelle's wondering where Jim is because they were supposed to have a night together. And we have an interesting scene where we got Dr. Ron and Heather and Mia and Oz all sitting around doing Never Have I Ever. And Mia's taking a drink every single time. And they're all going, really? And then, of course, that
has the best face in that scene. Just like, oh.
Right.
That's when Dr. Ron is like, hey,
right.
You into swinging?
Exactly. And that's where that's where we first see him drop the mask. And again, it's not that he's a total shit, because I'll admit in that situation, I'd be curious. But he definitely, it rubs Oz the wrong way. And Oz knows Heather well enough to know that she would not like this. he's like, this guy is not right for her.
I want to say, while watching it again,
right?
for this episode, there was a moment that I didn't really notice before in that scene.
Yeah.
Where like the last round of the show of them playing, never have I ever, been in an orgy and Mia
Right.
drinks and everybody is just, open mouth stunned. And the thing I missed before was the line, they were all really nice guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, one would hope so. But yeah. So Kara gets wasted and Jim tries to take her home. Just to take her home, just to be neighborly. And she's like, we're going to the same place, which is true. She lives next door. He used to babysit for her. So she of course has other ideas. And I saw in the commentary not the commentary, but like one of the bonus features, she makes the comment that she was sitting in every position but sitting down buckled in the way she's supposed to. It's like she pretty much was. She was all over the place and all over Jim to the point he ends up running off the road. And that's where we're introduced to John Cho's character. He comes up, he's like, hey, Jim, how's it going? In town for the reunion. We find out he planned it. And he thinks it's Michelle giving Jim a blowjob. And he's like, oh, man, okay, have fun, drives off. And
Jim never actually says to Kara that he's married at any given point in time either. So part of it is on him.
Well, I mean, she did see them arriving. I think she knows. It's just
whether she saw her is debatable.
I think she'd have to have known. And in that scene where she's coming on to him like as hard as she can, she is pretty drunk too. They really foreshadowed that a lot. Like pretty much every time she's on screen, she's kind of hinting at like being interested in him like that.
Yeah.
It's like, you always took such good care of me. And then when she introduces him to her friends, it's like, she's like, this is Jim. And they're like, oh, the babysitter, huh?
Yeah.
And he tells a kind of lame joke and they all like laugh really hard. He's so funny. And it's like, uh-oh, get out of there.
Yeah. It's like, it's pretty clear that yes, he could have been more forceful, but he's Jim. We don't expect Jim to perfectly enunciate his position to women because that's not Jim.
No, he did, but he did draw the line to do the right thing.
Yes.
The problem is he doesn't do it. He isn't very loud at doing the right thing.
No, he's not good at being forceful. He is not good. It's one of the reasons why, once again, Stifler ends up with the group. Because at the bar, it's Jim that says, didn't you get the message? Like, he's the one who folds first. That's his role in life.
Essentially, at the end of it all, that's one of the reasons why Michelle at Stifler's party, which, by the way, is the low end of the thing. It's where everything kind of crashes and burns.
Right.
I mean, that's the reason why she basically leaves him temporarily at that part. It's because it's not because she didn't believe that there was a misunderstanding. She even said, yeah, I know there's something that's not there, but I'm tired of it. I'm tired of having to deal with this stuff because he's too weak to deal with it. And part of it is he has to take charge, and he does. He does at the end, which is how things resolve. But he gets that party was a shit show.
Right. But a lot of stuff happened at that party that was interesting. And of course, the part where she basically breaks it off kind of was where it all comes to a head at the end. But before all that happened, we had the part where they're all crowded around watching Oz do his thing. And we get to see the lifelong humiliation of him apparently being a worse dancer than Gilbert Gottfried. Again, our NPH cameo. In other
I hear he was kind of a demon at that, though.
What's that?
I hear Gilbert Gottfried was kind of a demon at that, though. Like, somebody mentioned once that he was actually really good at something you would not expect him to be, and I think it was.
It wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me. It's not at all.
Hey, so long as they didn't have him sing while he danced, that was probably why. If they had him sing during that, he probably would have failed at that point.
I believe that party also... No, the night before, we also had seen Vicky come back into the situation. And Kevin and Vicky end up waking up next to each other. And he thinks something might have happened. And he might have cheated on his wife. And Vicky, when this comes to light, Vicky is offended that he would think that of her. And so they temporarily have an out.
And I'm kind of glad that they didn't go for the easy out of putting them back together as a relationship. They actually, at the end of the movie, he's happy with his wife. He's happy with the situation. It's just but so, you know, I mean, I liked that because that's not what I would have expected when I watched it.
There is a deleted scene where she is dancing with one of their classmates who says he always had a crush on her, and she seems interested, and they kind of leave it at that. I think they left that out of the final cut, and I don't know if we needed it or not, but it would have given her potentially some closure. But yes, at the end of the movie, Kevin and his wife are very much a couple, and there's nothing, and he and Vicky seem to be friends at the end. So, you know, they come back to, but they do temporarily have that misunderstanding where they had fallen into the lake, you know, and it's not the only time. I think we kind of
even the Shermanator came back.
Well, yes, but I think I kind of skipped over the part where the guys were out drinking. This led to him falling in the lake. But Jim got wasted and woke up on the kitchen floor, pantsless. And Michelle and Selena come in. And that leads to an awkward situation, of course. Because you got to have an awkward Jim situation in the kitchen. I mean, you know.
You do realize that pan, you can see through it.
Yeah, you got full frontal on that unrated version there.
I was so surprised that they showed that. It's just like, yeah, there's some big dick right there. But not really hidden at all. And it's like, wow, you typically don't see that.
It is hilarious. They use the see-through pan as the way to
and Selena's like, you know that thing's see-through, right?
What?
But yeah, so there's that. But at the party, she comes. I think she's the one that brings it, but like she and Michelle are like kind of, you know, all secretive, kind of. It turns out that they brought some outfits for Jim and Michelle to have some fun. And of course, when Michelle delivers the package, she goes in the other room to change, which, you know, in this kind of movie, if they're separated, they're not going to get back together to have fun before shenanigans ensue. That's just, you know, the way of it. So they put on these BDSM outfits, of course. Meanwhile, we also do need to mention a couple other things going on behind the scenes. We've got Jim's dad taking shots with Stifler, using an ice sculpture.
I was going to say, I like that ice sculpture.
Yes, and apparently so did they, both of them very much. They end up getting kind of hammered together, and then he goes off and finds Stifler's mom. And Eugene Levy and Jennifer Coolidge are longtime friends, have done a lot of movies together. This is actually the first time they've shared a scene in this whole series. And they end up sharing more than a scene. They end up kind of hitting it off. But then he's like, oh, I've had too much to drink. She's like, well, how about a joint, you know? So they start, token, and that not long after that, the fight breaks out, and that's the fight
Well,
where
I love it how Eugene Levy is like, oh my God, the Fuzz are here.
Well, yeah. Well, we get the Fuzz show up after the fight, but the fight breaks out where pretty much all 5 of the main guys find themselves fighting AJ and his friends, and apparently, Thomas Ian Nicholas, Kevin, did all his own stunts, and apparently all the others were surprised that he was doing his own stunts. They're all there letting their doubles do them. But they all did this big elaborate fight scene, which Jim again is doing in BDSM wear. Then we see Michelle show up in her dominatrix getup, and she starts whipping one of the guys with her little whip.
Just hitting the guy with a riding crop. Get off of my husband.
Right. And then we got, it gets crazy because you expect these fights to get a little crazy.
I mean,
and that's when the
cops don't show up too.
Yeah. Now, of course they show up. And yes, that's when Levy's like, oh shit, the Fuzz. He climbs out the window and runs away.
Well, and the funny thing is that also shows how much older they are, because when they're sitting there and they're expecting the cops to come to shut down the party, because that's how it was with all the high school parties.
Yeah.
But the cops are like, well, y'all are legal age. We're just here because we're here to get him. And it turns out Finch stole that bike.
Yes. And that's where we find out that all this crazy stuff Finch has been saying to everyone,
man, a mystery.
It's mostly lies. Like some of it is not, some of it's true, but most of it, he pretty much just made shit up. And he apparently stole the bike. He later on, he does show up at the reunion, and he tells them, he's like, yeah, I got mad at my boss and stole his bike, and he's like, I'm just I think he says he's a manager at Staples in New Jersey or something, like, just the most boring nondescript job you could think of. Well, maybe not the most, but like Stifler is worse off because he's just a temp. I mean, at least Finch is like a manager or something. But yeah, we find out that the man of mystery was really not as mysterious as he let on. But
Speaking of Stifler's job, did anybody else find it a little odd that it seemed like he was a coach in American Wedding, and it seemed like he was good at it and that was going well. So I wonder what happened with that.
We mentioned that, and I mean, my theory is that whoever wrote this didn't bother to watch American Wedding, or only watched a small cut of it.
Well, and I mean, also, again, this is 10 years later, and stuff changes in 10 years. Like, it doesn't, no one is going to be on the exact same track. I changed jobs a couple of times between graduation and, or between college and my reunion. And I tend to stick with jobs for a long period of time, but I've changed completely my, field of work on a couple of occasions. So to me, it's not at all strange. It's unfortunate because he had something he was good at and he liked. And like I said, he just got tired of the responsibility. That's my guess. And Brandon, you've seen the other movies. Like apparently in one of them, it's mentioned that he got into adult films or something.
Yeah.
So
they always would mention him out of the corner of like, this, because most of the other movies starred his brother.
Right.
And it always mentioned him as sort of like this mystic figure as to what he was doing. And
so his brother may have just been shooting the shit, basically. Yeah.
It might be because,
he might have been embarrassed to say, yeah, my brother's a ne'er-do-well temp.
But, the thing that I did find out about those extension movies is that none of them, except for Girls' Rules, was terribly bad. I'd actually put most of them about even with American Wedding. That's sad.
Yeah, a little bit. But I need to see them one of these days. There's not really a hurry, I guess.
I have the collection sitting on my
Right.
shelf.
So, we and we have been kind of all over the place. If anyone has anything up until this point, anything that they wanted to touch on before we move on to the reunion itself.
Now, the one scene that we left out, I'll cover as one of my favorite scenes in the movie, so it'll be covered.
Okay. Well, one big one that we kind of missed on the party, the first party, the birthday party, is that when Jim takes Kara home, he enlists his friends to be a distraction while he tries to sneak her into the house. And that, of course, goes about as well as any of Jim's plans, maybe a little better than most.
My favorite scene is during this time period because he tries to take her past in between the houses, and his son looks out the window, is like, "Hey, mommy, there's daddy."
Yeah, while he's carrying the naked neighbor's daughter. Yes, who I think had just been stripped by the shrub had pulled the blanket that he had tried to cover her with. She's largely naked because she took her dress off and threw it out the window. As you do. Or out of the sunroof or whatever, you know what I mean.
I just wanted to say, it kind of speaks to Jim's character growth that he is genuinely doing the right thing that entire time when she's just throwing herself at him, and he's like, nope, just please stop, nope.
Right.
Instead of you would not have expected this guy to be so good about that.
Well,
really,
he
almost any point in the past.
He does struggle. I mean,
not once does he open up this trap and tell her that he's married, though. Yeah. That's my biggest pet peeve or biggest thing against him. But I also understand why he doesn't, because he's not a very good talker, anyways.
Yeah. Well, speaking of good
in extreme situations, he still gets that really intense nervousness and kind of falls apart. And this is one of them.
And speaking of not being very good talkers, the distraction that his friends do, Stifler and Finch and Oz go to the front door, and Stifler opens his trap and says, "Hey, my friend's car broke down and we need to use your phone." And her dad looks at them all and says, "And none of y'all have cell phones?" They look at each other like,
but the wife recognizes Oz, so it works.
Yes. And then Stifler, I think, makes the comment, "Well, it worked last time I did this." Or something.
On this rewatch, I remembered this scene completely differently, so I don't know if there is an alternative version of it. But the scene I always remembered in my head was, they get up to the door and can we use your phone? And I remembered very clearly in my head, the dad, "Are you trying to tell me none of you guys have cell phones?" Yeah. And their response to that is everybody but Stifler just immediately is like, "Oh my God, Stifler, man, what the..." They
that's pretty much
almost lose it. And they just turn to Stifler and are yelling at him like, "You idiot, what?"
It was pretty stupid on his part. But yes, Kara's mom, it turns out, is a fan of Oz. Like I said, he has a lot of fans in his hometown. And we come to find out she's a little more just the way that her daughter is throwing herself at Jim, the mother starts doing that to Oz. And that does provide a little bit of a distraction. Helps Jim mostly get the job done. Although Stifler, of course, jumps up to go help, in quotes, because why wouldn't he? And then, of course, we have that, you got to have that tense moment where the father goes up to the room He sees his daughter. How'd you get up here? I didn't hear you come in. And then Stifler is hiding. We don't know where. Jim is hiding in a pile of stuffed animals. He moves and the cow moves. And then Kara is something like, "Oh, Mr. Moo, can you get him for me?" You know.
Yeah, like, because I'd hate to, break my hand on some horny kid's face.
Yes.
Oh, it's Mr. Moo. Could you get him for me? And Jim is just like, he just freezes and closes his eyes.
Right. And then, of course, the father goes back downstairs. And then we find out where Stifler was because he was up on top of the bed. And, of course, the bed breaks and he falls now. And then they have to get out of there pretty fast. Yeah, so there's that whole scene. It's kind of interesting. And again, I think that was during the part where Kevin fell in the lake, so that's probably why he wasn't there. But
they do say at the beginning of that scene, what the hell took you guys so long? It's like we were trying to find Kevin. Like nobody knows where he is. Right.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. Basically, and at the part, because Jim, being Jim, he's got to dig himself even deeper than he would have otherwise. In trying to apologize to Michelle, he throws Kara under the bus, basically. And
this is much later at the
fight at Stifler's party. Yes. At the end of the fight, he ends up pissing off both of them pretty badly. And then, we kind of go into the whole getting ready for the reunion itself. Michelle may or may not show up. She is gone, I think, to her grandmother's or whatever. They don't really, but she's not really around. We've got again, things are kind of frosty between Vicky and Kevin because he stupidly made it seem like, he thinks she's worse than she is. And of course, Stifler's still kind of wondering, why, my party was a bust, and he's almost his boss, who's a total douchebag. Although, in fairness, Stifler has not exactly been a model employee, but and it turns out, okay, this was another minor thing. When we first see Stifler at work, he's going around doing all the things you expect him to do, which were at place in high school and not so much in the workplace. And actually, I could probably, if I were to go through and count the HR violations, I'm sure there are quite a few. But one thing, he goes up and he says, Bob, I think his name is Bob, what the hell are you still here? Didn't they can your ass or something? And he's like, oh, Bob, I'm just kidding with you. But Bob's an older guy. And later on, we find out Bob had a heart attack because some asshole said he was fired. So because of that, Stifler has an opportunity to prove to his boss he's not a complete waste of space by doing the work Bob was supposed to do and that his boss doesn't want to do. So Stifler finds himself in a position of maybe actually wanting to do this. Maybe. Other stuff happens, but at the end, they all do end up showing up. Basically, we get to the reunion. All the guys basically show up together. Finch has again gotten out of jail. He explained the situation. He gets we get our brief reintroduction to Jessica, who, if I remember correctly, she's the one that kind of puts Kevin back over, go, apologize to her. She was always kind of the one that kind of smoothed things over between them. She kind of does. Of course, we find out Stifler was right about her. She likes women after all, obviously. They obviously that joke was going to be in there. We do see Sherman, but not until a little bit later. Earlier, we had met a character that Stifler had very fond memories of. We find out that those memories were not reciprocated, especially because she has put on a lot of weight, and Stifler doesn't use tact when pointing that out to her. So that's one of the reasons he's less than thrilled at his own party, because she basically did to him what he always did to her. And she is sitting off on her own. Stifler ends up hooking Sherman up with her. So Sherman shows up briefly for a pretty good send-off for him, and an ability for Stifler to kind of be nice to two people he was a douchebag to. So there's that little scene. We do see, a couple other things happening here. Finch ends up, he's been flirting with Selena all through the movie. They end up properly hooking up. There's an extended deleted scene of him and Jessica checking her out, and they're talking to each other, and it's an extended scene. There were a lot of scenes. Brandon, you complained about the editing in American Wedding. I think they definitely worked a lot more on the editing on this one.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of scenes that ended up cut or trimmed for this one. But that was one that was nice because we got to see more of Jessica and her interaction with Finch, but we didn't really need it, basically. And thank God they cut the scene of him and Selena in the bathroom stall. That was a little over the top. But Michelle shows up late. Jim does give a pretty decent apology to her. We did have that scene earlier I mentioned earlier with Jim and his dad having that heart-to-heart where his dad gave him that really good advice, actually. And Jim takes it to heart, and he, apologizes. They do a weird little bit of role play, which actually works out really well. It's like, and I believe Jim did take charge on that, like doing that little bit of role play of being long lost classmates coming back together at the reunion. And, I think she said something to the effect of, aren't you that guy who blew your load on the internet, because after all, everyone knows, even Kara has seen that video, he finds out.
It's not something anybody would probably forget, especially like locally.
Right. So basically, he and Michelle find the band room naturally. And Nadia walks in on them. We get our Nadia cameo where she has basically a Jim clone with her. And as they're walking away, he's like, I don't think I look anything like him. And it's like, yeah.
They missed the opportunity to use another trumpet on Jim.
To do what?
Yeah, I was thinking
to use another trumpet.
Yeah. I think he does pick up a flute, doesn't he? And like she kind of looks at it and but yeah.
No, that's a joke in the scene. It's like, you're great. Better than this. Yeah. And he holds up the flute and she looks at it like she's kind of like thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
well, yeah, they slid right past the trumpets, so they weren't going for that.
Yeah. Well, I guess your first love and all that. I mean, but yeah. So we have that, and then we have Stifler. He's hooked up Sherman. He is basically all alone, and Rebecca De Mornay walks in, and she introduces herself. She's like, she's like, it says she's looking for Paul Finch or whatever. And like, we had comments about Finch's mom, but this was the first time that we'd ever saw her. And of course, she talks to Stifler, and we come to find out she is much more similar to him than we ever would have expected. And one thing, I don't know what y'all thought about this, but I had the thought, having rewatched Wedding last week and then watching this one right after, they really do set up Stifler and Finch as antagonists all throughout the series. And slowly, of course, they learn to, I don't know, even at the end of this one, if they would call each other friends, but we come to find out that in very many ways, I feel like there really are kind of two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. And
that would kind of explain why, like, they're kind of friends, but at the same time, they really kind of can't stand each other.
Exactly.
I mean, you tend to hate things about yourself, and if somebody that you're around is like reflecting it all the time, like, you can't put your finger on it, but you're not necessarily going to get along. Like,
right,
their whole thing throughout all the movies makes perfect sense, like, through that lens.
Right. And especially with them basically switching their, like, Finch actually goes and gets an age-appropriate girlfriend in this one, while Stifler ends up doing his mom probably on the half way of the field, and that's where we get our reunion between the MILF guys, because we got John Cho just sitting there watching them, and Justin Isfeld comes down, and he looks at him, and he just, MILF, and Cho just looks at him, MILF, MILF, MILF. And then they start the chant, and it's like they were never apart.
At some point, don't they like hug while they're still chanting?
I think so, yeah. They like
it's such a weird scene, but it's kind of touching in a strange way, because he makes some comment like, friendships don't last, or he says something kind of grimdark about it.
Right.
When Jim is like, "Hey, where's the other guy?"
Right.
And I like how even Jim refers to them as the MILF guys. It's like, I don't know, not sure if they really get names,
Well, in the last one, they were listed in the credits as John and Justin, and I think they did refer to him as John, I think. But in this one, yeah, they go back to basically their MILF guy 1 and 2. It's actually kind of funny that John is listed as MILF guy number 2 when he's by far the bigger part of the movie. But
was he listed as number 2 in one of the other ones, and they just kept his credit?
I think so. Yes, I could be wrong, but I think so. We could check, but I think that's the case. But we get one last scene at the end where they're at Dog Ears, and it's actually the first time they're hanging out with Stifler at Dog Ears. And they all have I think their big thing there's no to the next step in this movie, but I think it's till next time or something like that is what they end up saying, which is kind of a good kind of open-ended, hey, we might do this again one day, but we're not going to paint ourselves into it. Huh?
We've already passed the 20-year mark. So I'd say, though, if they could aim to do a movie in 2029,
right,
they could do a 30-year class reunion.
Right.
What you could do, which I think would be pretty interesting, if you were able to find a really smart way to like write it and like research it like in a relatable way and make it relatable, like the first one was, is you basically have like all of our core guys like with families, and they've all essentially become like what Jim's dad was, in the like high school, college years, like for their kids.
Well, actually, that is one interesting thing about this one is there are a couple of scenes where Jim becomes his dad while talking to his dad, like the shoes on the other foot. And that's kind of interesting. It's like, I think at one point he actually uses the phrase, it's a normal, natural thing at one point, talking to his dad. Yeah. I think that was when he was trying to encourage him to go back out and start dating again.
He makes him the J-Date profile.
Yes, he makes the J-Date profile. Michelle tweezes his eyebrows, all that stuff.
And the eyebrows still don't look any less bushier, just more neater.
But we do see there was a lot of hair. Although not as much in the old pictures. Like when Jim's setting up the profile, we see pictures of his dad in the 60s and 70s and all. And it's like, oh my God.
Well, yeah, he definitely sports those Groucho Marx eyebrows really well.
Well, not just that. He had like this huge handlebar mustache when in the 60s. And he had the big fro in the 70s. It's just crazy. But it's they apparently had a lot of fun filming that, and I can imagine, or doing the pictures at least. I'm trying to think like what would be having Jim's son going to college or something would be a logical one. Now, of course, one day, a logical one, but you got to wonder how and where they would go about it would be, there's got to be an American Funeral down the line somewhere.
American Funeral, that's
Well, I mean, they did sort of allude to something like that with, like we find out Jim's mom died a while ago, and that was a surprisingly heavy moment for one of these. Like it felt very real too. It's like, it's been 3 years. Like, they're both just kind of not exactly comfortable talking about it.
I guess they could kill off Michelle's mom, and that would give us an excuse to bring back her father and sister for another movie, and it would give us a chance to
Stifler's mom could die.
Yeah, but I was going to say that
a viewpoint from the eye of
I was going to say that would be a chance to do it without killing off the main cast. Yeah, Stifler's mom or Jim's dad would be logical for that. Although, you can't really have these movies without Jim's dad. That just doesn't seem right.
So at the very end of this, it is kind of implied that Jim's dad and Stifler's mom actually get together. Like, for more than like a one-shot thing.
Yeah.
So he already had one wife die. I mean, let him have it.
Right.
I think that they should do American crossover. We talked about this before.
Right.
American crossover with Harold and Kumar essentially. Ooh, and Road Trip. We'll just take those together.
Yeah.
Because,
there you go, American Road Trip. There you go.
And then mix it with Van Wilder, and then we have a movie.
Well, if you think about it, the Road Trip series, this series, and freaking Harold and Kumar all came out around the same time. So they would all be in that same generation. So it would fit. And they have similar comedic elements to them. So they could be a big thing. And it would work for their 30th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hate to say it, but my 30th high school reunion would be in 2 years from now.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. But,
So, I'm not quite the age. I'm a little bit older than the characters in this, but I'm not so much older that I can't relate.
Mine would be in 2 years too. God damn.
I mean, 2 years. I mean, that's all. That's
well, not your 30 year.
Not your 30 year. Probably, but yeah.
Well, okay, my 20, but 20, but still.
And of course, for Jacob, that would be. I think that one hit you right on the head with the.
Year. Well, it's like I said. This one was their 13-year reunion, and the movie came out a couple years after my 10-year reunion, so the 10-year was fresh in my mind. And we did not. In this one, they made a conscious effort to recreate that senior prom or whatever it was. My school did not do anything that fancy. We basically rented a picnic area at a local park. That's pretty much what it was. It was like a picnic, basically.
Yeah, ours did not come close to doing that. We had a room at the Elks Lodge.
Right.
I still don't know why I went, because I had nothing but nightmares from high school. I don't understand why I went. But yeah, so I'm like, wow, they went all out for this one. I'm just like, they didn't do that for my school.
Yeah.
But I think that they have the prime to come back and do this for a 30th anniversary. I mean, the reason why they did this in 12 years is because they intended to do it in 10 years, but they couldn't get everything together in time.
Right.
And they needed to get everything together this time.
Right. Yeah, they did. Again, they missed a couple of them, but mostly, yeah, they got almost everyone in for at least one scene. And most of them felt perfectly natural. Like I said, I think Nadia felt a bit forced, but you had to have Nadia there for at least one scene. I think most of them, the way they brought in Jessica and Sherman made perfect sense, and worked well for them.
When Nadia showed up with the guy who looked like Jim, I thought the gag was going to be they did manage to hook up one time, like off camera, and it was like Jim's son from back in college days. Because when the guy says he doesn't look anything like me, I thought that's what that meant. But seeing it again, it's like, oh, she just got with a guy who looks like Jim.
Right.
Which is a lot less messy, but also a lot less interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, if you're just doing
it's Shermanator.
Yeah. Well, if you're just doing like a brief one-off cameo, it's probably better if it's not super messy. You want it pretty clean so that they didn't need to have all those dangling questions. But yeah. So anyway, I guess we pretty much covered the plot, unless anyone has anything else plot-wise they want to say.
Well, Kara does get a resolution where Jim stops and talks to her and is like, you don't have to force these things. He basically gives her a genuinely good adult to adult piece of advice.
Right. Well, I think he straight up says, hey, I get it. When I was your age, I was only thinking about sex. He's up front with her. He tells her, I get it. But, yeah, just don't rush it, And it's, yeah. And she takes it to heart. She appreciates it,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, Jim actually does become a little bit more assertive. Not entirely, but a little bit more assertive.
Right.
And you can tell that he has matured, which is a great thing.
And again, I think a lot of these people, a big part of the movie was them trying to realize, because, the whole saying, you can't go home again. And that's one of the cool things about a reunion movie is it gives people a chance to re-examine where they were versus where they are. And most of them do grow a little bit. I mean, again, Finch, it looks like he's finally started an actual relationship with someone that might be more than just kinky, weird stuff. You've got, Jim becomes a little more assertive. He and Michelle learn a lot more about how to connect to each other and to rediscover each other now that, even though there's now a kid in the picture, Jim's dad learns to live again, but Stifler also has to come to terms with the fact that he's still in high school mentally. And I think that he actually does a decent job of shaking that free a little bit. You know,
I mean, the scene with Sherman at the end.
Yeah.
Where he actually, Sherman's looking at him like, I don't trust you this time.
Yeah.
And then he does pull away, but he says, no, I'm just kidding this time. No, man, let's help get you laid, man.
Right.
He finally, you feel he finally does go beyond himself a little bit. And he also gets revenge on Finch at the end. So, hey, that's...
Yeah.
And he does punch that guy for Oz, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And granted, oh yeah, there is that. Like
nothing.
Yeah. What was it? It was like the doctor was I think he was like kind of goading Oz, trying to get him to and Oz is straight up like, well, Heather wouldn't like it if I did that. But then Stifler comes in and she's like, well, she won't give a shit what I do. It's like, yeah, because so yeah, he does end up doing that.
He threatens if he punches him, he'll sue, and that's when.
Oh, right.
And Finch's,
that's right. That's right. He says, that's what he says. He's like, I'll take you for everything you have or whatever. And Stifler's like, well, I ain't got shit. So yeah, that was. And yes, Oz and Heather do end up kind of rediscovering each other and deciding to. And at the end, he says, I might stick around here for a little while, because apparently the main reason they split up was because he wanted to go out to LA and she didn't. So
yeah,
that's he's willing to try and see if maybe that's worth more than his career, so there's that. And not really sure there was a major change for Kevin in this one, other than maybe him and Vicky kind of renewing their friendship, but maybe I missed something, but
well, I mean, there is a bit about like adult relationships, like between you and somebody you used to date, like many years later. Because I mean, they do chat about stuff like, it's like, oh, so you've been stalking my Facebook, huh? When he compliments like, all the food she posts,
right.
And then she says something like about, oh, and you and your like family game nights or whatever, and he's like, oh, so you've been stalking me, and it's kind of like. There seem to still be some kind of feelings there, but nobody's exactly sure. Like they both understand that time is like long past, but they're not quite sure how to, I guess, handle that like internally.
Well, I guess if I were to say where Kevin grows, it would be coming to terms with that. I feel like he never fully came to terms with that, and maybe she didn't either. And so, yeah, I think by the end of the movie, they kind of they've learned to actually be friends in a way that they never really could before. So I think there is that. And that does take some growth.
And Kevin's wife is at the reunion too, and her and Vicky like hit it off, and like you can tell that they get along, and it's kind of cathartic to see. Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
Everybody gets like a decent character ending. Like Stifler gets the whole thing where he reconnects with the lacrosse team members.
Yeah.
You'd think he'd be a little more comfortable around that after some of his experiences in Wedding. He doesn't really say anything too bad, and they kind of and the guys are kind of like, well, I mean, he's still the same as he was before. And they invite him to plan their wedding, and it seems like that's going to be, what he ends up doing.
And I think that is part of Stifler's emotional growth, is learning to accept that lifestyle in a way he never could before. Because he's definitely seen a lot and been through a lot, but that doesn't mean he ever really learned to accept it. But yeah, when they tell him, hey, you should be a party planner, and he's like, you know what? yeah, I should, and it's like, and that might actually be something that he would be really good at. It could
Probably.
well be. Yeah. Even though not all of his efforts in the past went off well.
Well, even though the cops would shut them down in the previous movies, his parties were always, everybody in all the films always say that his parties were the best.
I think also it's probable, in fact, that he has figured out that not all parties have to be cut from the same cloth and that you can tailor parties to different needs. I think he is probably figured that out by now. But at any rate, so let's go ahead. If we've mostly covered character and story, let's go into production. I know we've already made some comments to that effect, but does anyone have anything they really want to say about the production that we haven't really gone into yet?
No, I mean, I think the production is pretty much as it was. Lots of good locations,
Right?
And, a lot of good stunt work there, but otherwise,
although
much. Oh, and one kick-ass ice sculpture.
Apparently still not much location shots in Michigan. Apparently the first 3 were largely filmed in California with just a few on-site locations. And apparently here most of the shoot was moved to Georgia. I don't know if anyone really noticed it. I might not have noticed if I didn't see that in the production, but
the same place.
I mean, I did see the production company thing, like, made in Georgia, and I was like,
yeah.
Georgia, California, they look the same.
It is kind of a shame that these movies were not filmed in Michigan, though. It just feels like that would have been a nice thing to do. Maybe for the 30th year they'll do that.
So I'll admit, I have looked at shots of the beach for the Great Lake of Michigan,
Right.
and they did get that look down. So that was good.
Right. So, and I'll agree. I'll admit, I'll agree. I think they did good with the locations. They did good with trying to recreate scenes from the first movie. They worked really hard on recreating, like I said, a couple of the scenes. And again, we've talked a little bit about the editing, definitely tighter than it was for Wedding. I would argue probably more so than it was for American Pie 2. Anything else on basic production?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so music. Again, we have that one classic moment that I will always remember till my dying day, where that poor innocent child said, "Isn't classic rock the best?" About Spice Girls.
Oh, I forgot all about that. That was harsh. Like, that was not my thing at all, but at the same time, it was just like, ugh.
It was more my sister's music, but I have always considered Spice Girls to be pop and pop only.
Yeah, they are pop. It's straight up pop. Like it's.
But do you consider it to be old music, Dave?
See, yeah, at this point it is classic.
Oh, it's definitely old music now. It's like super old.
Yeah, but even when the movie came out, that was pushing it. But
now, if they had said Guns N' Roses,
yeah,
that would have been classic rock right there.
See, Guns N' Roses is one of those borderline ones. You got people like Guns N' Roses and Tom Petty and some of them that were already considered classic rock when the first movie came out. And I'm like, that music was only 10 years old when that first movie came out, you know?
I was saying Guns N' Roses came out like late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a different time frame with some of this stuff, but yeah. But like we said before, if they'd been playing Blink 182 or Jimmy Eat World or Third Eye Blind or something, it would have fit perfectly with that line. But the fact that she did that for the Spice Girls, it made me facepalm and bust out loud laughing at the same time. I love it. Of course, the movie, we also get a slightly updated soundtrack. I mean, there's definitely some more contemporary songs relative to the others, so it's not as much of a 90s soundtrack, but you definitely still had some in there. And like one that definitely jumped out at me, Everybody Talks by Neon Trees. That would have been contemporary rock when the film came out. So it's definitely not what they would be calling classic rock. But some of the stuff was definitely a little more, you still got some good Charlotte on here. You still got, you got some My Chemical Romance, I guess, might fall in between Time Rise. There's that R. Kelly song they're playing early on,
Oh, Lord. That definitely didn't age well.
right. But I believe that's what
I once heard somebody call Disturbed classic rock, and that was like, okay, that's
Slipknot is technically classic at this point.
Anything that was like 3 months ago in the young people's eyes.
Okay, and here's one
classic.
I'm sorry though. Some of these bands are over 20 years old, which to me that is classic at that point.
The song that played when Oz and Heather had their tete-a-tete in the first film, "Sway," is played again for them in this movie. But this is a good one that shows my age, 2 shows how freaking old the movie makes me feel, but also how freaking nostalgic it is. And it's perfect it's one of the reasons why the movie ties so close for me. And that is my high school class, my graduating class, produced a shirt with everyone's name on it. Like that was our senior shirt. And it had a quote on it. And the quote was, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Of course, which is from Semisonic's Closing Time, which is featured on the soundtrack here. And that would be considered classic rock now, which makes me feel so old and sad to think that. But yeah, I would absolutely think that if she had said that Closing Time was classic rock, I would have bought it as something kids that age would think. Let alone now. But the fact that song was on the soundtrack was like perfect for me. Like, wow, this really is my high school class. If they had what was that? I'll Remember You by Sarah McLachlan, or Journey to the Past from the Anastasia movie, or if they'd had I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, from Armageddon. If they had any of those, I would have been, oh my God, they are really trying to hit me over the head with the nostalgia here. Luckily, they didn't have those. But anyway, any other thoughts on music or production before we go into favorites? I should also, I guess, mention, because it is there is background music by Lyle Workman. It was pretty Workman-like, I think. It didn't really jump out to me. I don't know if anyone else really noticed it, but anyway.
Not particularly.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and say this movie, would this be what they call a Lego sequel? Or is it just more of a full-on sequel?
It's a sequel.
Because they didn't really pass it on to another generation, but
I think with that other designation, it implies that you're kind of like remaking something, whereas it's like, no, this is clearly like its own story. I mean, it has, similar things happening, sort of, but not really, no. I mean, it's...
Well, my understanding of a Lego sequel is more like Scream 5, where it's a continuation. It is a sequel, but they're bringing in basically a new cast of characters and continuing the story. I don't know if they had
a new cast here, I don't think.
Yeah, they didn't have enough, and most of them were one-off characters. Like, if they do another one, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought back Finch's mom, and Selena could potentially come back in the future, but I don't see Dr. Ron coming back.
Ron.
Now, if they were to pass it off and say that the new movies would center on Kara and her friends going forward, but then again, we would be in sort of a situation like we have with Stifler's brother in the other movies, right? So I guess maybe they're more of I don't know. But anyway, point being, I was thinking about that so let's do our favorite scene and or favorite quote, favorite character in this one. And then if there's a movie that you would like to see them do like they did with this one, or like they did with the Scream movies, or Clerks, or The Color of Money, or the Before movies, where basically they pick up the story way down the line, continue it forward, where it's a sequel, but it's also kind of a fresh start. What would be a movie you'd like to see that for? And let's start with you, Brandon.
Well, let's see. Favorite scene? I actually will say that scene where that woman kind of gets her revenge on Stifler using him.
Yeah.
Because I think that one couples well with the scene with Sherman, because in his own way, Stifler had more organic growth than in American Wedding. He had growth in American Wedding. It was more like a switch. Okay, here's your growth switch. It's on now. And then they turn it back off again. But here I felt like he legitimately had some growth. And that was one of the scenes that led up to that. Oddly enough, I will give Stifler my MVP for this particular movie.
Oh, okay.
The only time I would give it. And then I'd say, as far as the movie, I would like to see Dude, Where's My Car? Have a revival just because. Or, just to keep in line with this series, another Harold and Kumar movie.
Right. It's good times.
Maybe, I would like to see that crossover. Harold and Kumar, American Pie, Euro Trip, / road trip, basically. Yeah. And you know what the heck with The Hangover.
Okay.
Have that
so you want to see Matt Damon cameo again as a rock star?
Exactly. This time he's sleeping with Michelle.
Oh, okay. Now, I got to say, though, if we do a Harold and Kumar continuation, we got to bring back Danny Trejo as Harold's father-in-law. I
actually do think that Harold and Kumar, though, is the legit leader for that, because I do think that it could do that pretty easily.
Right. I think so. It'd be a little weird seeing Joe played the same two different characters in the same, but it could work. But anyway, how about you, Dave?
Well, I think I've already mentioned my favorite scene is when Jim is going by with the and his kid notices him and says, "Hi, hey, mommy, I see daddy." Moment. As far as favorite character, I'm gonna go with Eugene Levy's character. I'm somewhat and I kind of like him as like
Dave, you're breaking up, or at least on my end you are.
Yeah.
What about now?
That's better.
Hello?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Well, I always think that Eugene Levy is kind of like the movie dad that you kind of always want to see, you know. And what was the third thing you wanted? What kind of movie you would want to be extended?
Well, let's say there's a movie that you saw that you're like, okay, this movie could use this sort of sequel, like a reunion or some such thing several years down the road just to see where the people are.
I could see Van Wilder getting a third one where, you know, maybe Van Wilder and Taj have a high school reunion or whatnot.
Okay.
I was more into those movies than I was Harold and Kumar. But I do agree that Harold and Kumar versus movie should happen. Needs to happen, in fact. But in any case, so that's where I stand.
Okay. Alrighty.
Although I do think there should have been a proper sequel to The Mask instead of that bullshit that we got.
That was
a classic.
Well, and the
Son of the Mask.
Yeah,
Well,
theoretically, it's a possibility. It is theoretically a possibility. All right. How about you, Dustin?
It's sort of hard to pick a favorite scene because when I think of this movie, I think of quite a few of them. I'm trying to do this based off of what I remember the most of from the first time I saw this, and I think it would be the whole like sneaking Kara back into her house thing.
Right.
Because it's you in pretty much any other series, you would expect it to be like really like awful and exploitative and almost like a Revenge of the Nerd kind of situation.
Right.
The thing, just because of like the topic and how tastelessly stuff like that is often done in like older comedies.
Right.
And instead, like Jim is really respectful the entire time. Like even when Stifler is like creeping on her a little bit, like it's immediately like they immediately shut it down. Like it's very clear there's like zero tolerance for that sort of thing nowadays, and even Stifler just kind of backs off from it.
Right.
So, and just like she wakes up, like she bonks her head in the car when he has to like slam on the brakes, and like when his son sees him and he's like and he drops her, like, without him noticing, she like got up and like snuck off, and so she's adding kind of another layer of it too. It's like, Kara, where'd you go? It's like, come find me. She's still wasted, and it's like And there were quite a few lines that kind of that like alluded to like what the relationship was like when like he was just like her babysitter. Because when she does appear from kind of out of nowhere in the backyard, she was like, "You never could find me." And it's like, So that whole thing really packs kind of a lot of character into it. like you can tell it wasn't some throwaway joke.
Right.
And what kind of makes it stand out too is I saw Promising Young Woman a while ago, and I read an essay discussing like some of the tropes of it's like, oh, like, move the unconscious girl, like, somewhere, and it was talking about how those scenes were handled in other movies, and thinking back to it was like, yeah, that's kind of right. So seeing them, like, I mean, they kind of goof it up, but they're actually trying to take care of her.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why that's maybe my favorite scene. And also the whole disconnect between, it's like, oh yeah, this excuse worked in the 90s. It's like, well, guess what? It sure doesn't work in the 2010s.
Right.
And I think maybe for favorite character, Stifler's really loud in this one, but I don't like him as much here because he hasn't particularly grown all that much. Especially compared to Wedding, which, again, just baffling. I think I like Oz the most here, because it's like he did kind of hit. I don't really know what his goals specifically were, but like his sports casting stuff, like he seems, aside from his weird model girlfriend, he seems pretty happy with the life he has. I mean, he's embarrassed about the dance-off. But I think maybe a little unnecessarily so, because he did seem pretty good. So I'm pretty sure Magic Mike came out just a little bit before this, and his whole scene with that, I think they were trying to parody Magic Mike or something, because it very much felt like that.
I think you might be right, because I think Magic Mike 2 came out 3 years after this did. So, yeah.
And the first Magic Mike would have been, what, 09, I want to say?
Ish. Something like that. Yeah.
And movie that I would want to see a sequel to, or like a relaunch, kind of... I'm not really sure on that, because there's...
Magic Mike came out the same year as this.
Oh, it did?
Magic Mike came out the same year as American Breed.
Okay.
Same year.
In 2011 or
2012? Well, I guess so.
This
was 2012.
I thought the first Magic Mike was slightly earlier.
No, it's 2012. Yeah.
Huh. I'll be damned.
And that's
Well, they still felt similar, maybe intentional or not, but
right.
And like Heather's pretty much the only person who's not making fun of him in that room too, which I think adds a lot of credibility to them, like reconnecting.
Right.
Because they seemed to have like the most stable, like good relationship throughout all the other entries.
Right.
Dang, what would I want to reboot? Maybe the Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 reboot.
Continuation of that one?
No, like redo that one.
Well, again, we're not talking reboots. We're talking taking an established cast and just continuing the story. So it's not, but not necessarily the usual sort of sequel. More like
I'm gonna be crazy. I am gonna stick with that because I did kind of like Jackie Earle Haley, Freddy, and I would like to see more of that.
Okay.
So yeah,
sounds good.
Take that, controversial opinion.
Alrighty. And for me, well, again, the scene I'll always remember is that scene in the car with her rocking out to Spice Girls. That one line just always, yeah. But I would say also there are a lot of little moments. And the moment where Jim and his dad are talking and his dad kind of helps click things into place about, kind of helps Jim and Michelle get things back on track when they had that little role play session at the reunion, those are some nice little character moments there. And yeah, the one where Stifler actually goes out on a limb and helps Sherman out was actually a nice little scene. And I kind of like the scene where he told off his boss. I mean, of course, I kind of like seeing it when people tell off bad bosses,
Well, and the guy who played his boss was also in the series Chuck.
Okay.
He was he was one of the characters that worked at the Pymore with the main guy. So it was kind of neat to see him in a boss role.
Vic Zahay. I never really saw that show. I always meant to, and I just never really got around to it. He also has a role in Captain Marvel. He's been in a few other things, an episode of Lucifer, what have you. What was I going to say? As far as characters, I mean, again, series overall, Michelle's a clear favorite. Jim's dad's my second favorite. For this movie specifically, that's kind of a hard call. I'm tempted to go with Jim's dad. I'm almost tempted to go with Oz for this movie specifically. And it's the one movie I actually genuinely like Kevin. Like, Kevin annoys me in most of the other movies. I like him in this one. But overall, I guess Jim's dad by a hair, or an eyebrow, I should say. A couple of them. As far as, I threw that question out without thinking about it, partly because I was curious what y'all would come up with. Some of the times you hear about movies, you're like, why are they making a sequel to that? And then you see it and you're like, that's pretty good. I would not have thought of that, and I've been trying to think of a great one. One that comes to mind that would be controversial, but I could see myself enjoying it, but I have very mixed feelings about suggesting any work right now for Mel Gibson. I'm very seriously conflicted about this. But I would not mind seeing a continuation of Maverick that brings back him and Annabelle somewhere down the road. I think that would be interesting. Juno comes to mind as one that could have a sequel several years later. I'm having trouble thinking of one that I would jump on. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if the Coens ever lost their minds and decided to make a sequel to one of their own movies. Maybe if they were to... Actually, Tara Reid in the, Vicky, did do that short film that was supposedly a sequel to The Big Lebowski. It's actually pretty hilarious and worth watching. But I would almost see a sequel to Raising Arizona being a possibility that could be interesting.
I couldn't see a sequel to Juno. Sorry. But I did like the soundtrack to it.
Oh, it has a great soundtrack. But that's a good example of someone where most of the cast are still around and could do it if they wanted to. That's not true of a lot of these potential movies, unfortunately.
Well, they'd have to really go into
trans issues and stuff on Juno.
Which they could do, and it would give it an interesting twist. But I don't know that I
Brandon
would.
wants to put forward a sequel to American Beauty, doesn't he?
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he would love that.
Well, you wouldn't have to have Kevin Spacey in it.
Well, you would have it. You would have it narrated by his ghost or something. Which technically the first film is, though.
Ooh, the second film is The Plastic Bag. That's all it is.
Okay. Well, actually, no. I bet Brandon's probably clamoring for a sequel to Sideways, which is a possibility. But
I did say that I did say that I gave it a better chance, and I like
did.
it much better this
You
time.
did. Yes, you did.
American Beauty, however, there is no redeeming that trash.
I could see a sequel to John Travolta's Bubble Boy.
To which one?
To
Bubble
John
Boy?
Travolta's Bubble Boy.
Can't get
Or
much
how
worse
about
than that,
Jim Carrey's Rubber Face?
Okay.
or a sequel to The Pest.
Okay. Yeah. I like I said, I'm drawing a blank on one that I would actually be clamoring for. I'm sure I'll think of one as soon as we're done. But
Joe's Apartment too.
What happened?
Joe's Apartment needs a sequel.
Well, there's the upcoming re-release to Kamikaze Girls. Maybe it'd be interesting to see that 20 years later. I don't know. Anyway, that I guess wraps it up then. Does anyone have any final thoughts on American Reunion or on the American Pie core franchise?
Not that I know of, unless anyone else does.
Okay. Well, all right then.
I think I've mostly said
right.
my piece on this just being like a great series overall with pretty solid quality across all the movies.
Yeah. I think watching them all again back to back to back was kind of an interesting way to do it. I can't recall that I've ever watched more than a couple of them close together. Maybe the first three, but I couldn't swear to it. But I know this is the first time I've seen Reunion in the company of the others. It is kind of cool to watch them as a thing. And I kind of look forward this year to doing that with a few franchises. I'll be curious to see how that goes. But
this was my first time at least watching this one. So
right.
And seeing them all together, that's another thing. I've never watched them all together. I've always seen either one or the other, like on TV, and it's just on, So,
Now you got to watch the spinoffs.
Oh, okay. Apparently, Kara, one of the movies she was in 2 years after this, was a movie that did have an unexpected and surprisingly good sequel, and that was Neighbors. I'll bet you could do another Neighbors movie several years down the road, and that would
Actually, you could do another road trip movie. Actually,
you could,
because those didn't even have to have the same cast.
Yeah. But I'll agree with you. The idea of a dude where's my car out of the blue, like that, because this was what, like 30
Ashton
years?
Kutcher, 30 years later, 20 years later. Still can't find his car.
Man. But anyway.
Yeah, not to mention it, I did kind of get like a Neighbors feel from a lot of the scenes in this when they're clashing with like the quote unquote modern day teens.
Right. Yeah, there was definitely some similarity.
I still haven't seen Neighbors.
That's pretty
What the sad thing is most of those teens are pretty much the same age that these characters
Yeah,
are.
well, the antagonist in those movies was Zac Efron. In the second movie, Chloe Moritz joined the cast, and they're a lot older now. But like, if you were to do another Kick-Ass movie, Hit Girls are grown up at this point. That would be interesting. And that was one I thought about. Kick-Ass would be an interesting one to do. But anyway, back to you, Dave.
Alrighty, I guess I'll bring this around.
Dave?
And then he vanished.
Yeah.
Never to be heard from again.
Yeah.
I almost added that
Alrighty.
part.
Well, okay. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming along with us for this fantabulous journey that we've been having, discussion on the last of at least the main grouping of the American Pie franchise. If you haven't gone out and American Reunion, go out and see it, and then let us know. Come back down in our comment section and let us know what you thought about our discussion and the movie. So that being said, let's go around and tell them a little bit about ourselves and what we do. Dustin, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Well, on the internet, I'm known as Cryptaxis. I hang out on Twitter a lot as Cryptaxis, as you can see in my screen name there. I run a YouTube channel called The Crypto Horrors, where I used to show off like cool horror pickups, but the lack of pickups has frozen me solid. So go subscribe and give me a reason to, work harder to upload more stuff again. So, yeah. And with that, I'm gonna head out. So, night, everybody. Like, share, and subscribe.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. All righty. Heading over to you, Jake. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I am Kotobukijake. I am the co-host of the YouTube channel SeptumSin versus the World, where we talk about physical media and other related things. And I am lately been working very, very, very hard on a project that I talked up at my own high school reunion, and I have been feeling very much like a slacker for some time. So I'm working very hard on this, of trying to finally get my first book written, first novel written. So I'm working very hard on that. Also, keep very busy, day job and all that. Hasn't left a lot of time for viewing, and frankly, I've been going back and forth on the inclination for viewing lately, but I do still watch a movie each week, so I can join these folks for our discussions, and look forward to, I enjoyed covering this series this month, and I'll look forward to what we have upcoming in the next month. And that's, I guess, about it right now. Just keeping on.
Alrighty. Sorry about that momentary lag. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
SeptumSin versus the World. We like physical media. We talk about that. Check out the video that Jake and I did last week. We did a nice pickup. Also, check out the reviews. I've been getting back into those, and I reviewed the Polonia movie, The Stalking. So check that out. And then, of course, this week on Wednesday, we are doing a anime anticlimax episode to get us back on track, where we cover the live-action adaptation of City Hunter with Jackie Chan. That's going to also be very fun, so you can check us out there. And, of course, meet us next week as we celebrate Tammy's birthday with Interview with the Vampire. And with that, I need to leave.
All righty. And my name is David Stewart. See you later. Thank you for being on. And my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on this fantastic journey we've been having. And I'm looking forward to the coming weeks as we kick off another a month of birthdays and movies. But I do moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I also talk about movies mostly every Sunday. And this Sunday, we are covering Forbidden Planet on the channel. So hopefully you get a chance to come and see what we, as a group on that channel, think about that movie. I know we've covered it on this channel, so if you haven't checked out that discussion, check it out now and see whether at least my opinion has either changed or differed over the years. But I do some video pickups and some video reviews from time to time. So check some of those out. I know we have together a video between myself and SeptumSin versus the world on some pickups. If you haven't seen that, I believe it's like an after holidays special video of some of the things we picked up. I know we did it a couple weeks back, but if you haven't yet, check that out. And I'm glad I finished a small scene for the film. Slowly but surely, we're trying to get the second film in my anthology done. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. And I guess, next week, as Brandon said, we are covering a movie for Tammy. I'm just gonna say happy birthday to her next week, so that we can kick off the month with kind of a bang. In any case,
which one are you kicking off with?
We're kicking off with Interview with the Vampire.
Okay, good deal.
So Brandon already has both of those movies, so he'll be able to send those your way too. Since
I have that one. I don't have the other one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he does have the other one too. So, but in any case, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week here on Inside Movies Galore. Everyone, say good night.
Good night.
Right.
Inside Movies Galore just makes you just want more. We've had all in the world of media to explore. Horror, anime, or Curious George. Our love of new things was our reward. It is the best night of our week.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.